So what we found was that meditation reduced the feelings of guilt. People in the mindfulness condition said they were less guilty. And then we found in other studies that meditation reduced how much people wanted to pay reparations to others who they harmed. And in this study specifically, it basically reduced the correlation or the connection between being in a situation that would make you feel guilty and feeling like you need to pay people back. So normally, here's the control condition where people didn't meditate. So what we did was we told them, imagine this situation where you are in a group presentation and you overslept. So you were supposed to be in the presentation and you just forgot. And so you woke up after the end of it and you basically let your group down. And that's the guilty situation. It's supposed to make them feel guilty. And in the control condition for the non-guilty condition, we told them, we're in a group presentation and you did the presentation and it was fine. And they showed up, they didn't let down their group. They weren't supposed to be feeling guilty. Then we asked them, then they meditated or not. And then we asked them, how much money would you want to pay at the restaurant if the bill is short and they need to pay extra money because people have not paid enough? And so the people who felt guilty, they said they wanted to pay more money, probably because they feel guilty from the earlier scenario about them missing their group. Whereas if they didn't feel guilty, they paid less money. So here's this difference in the normal condition. However, in the meditation condition, there was no difference. So it reduced whether a guilt-inducing situation made people actually feel like they were going to want to pay people back who they harmed. So there's also other research that I didn't personally conduct, but that I think is also important to this topic, which has found that a state of mindfulness, meditating for 10 minutes, can help people become more creative, specifically for insight types of creativity. And so this is important because insight creativity is often harder to change, often harder to improve. It's about finding an aha moment where you kind of have to go beyond what you know and find some creative solution that is not immediately obvious. And it's not just about coming up with more ideas, but about one correct answer. So it's probably harder to affect this type of creativity than others. So that could be valuable. And if you're thinking about, okay, should I meditate or not? If you're in a situation where the negative emotion you're feeling could help you, then you probably don't want to interrupt that negative emotion just because you want to meditate. So if you are feeling anxious before a presentation and you can tell yourself, okay, this isn't really anxiety, this is enthusiasm, this is excitement, and I'm going to let these nerves carry me, and I'm going to use this energy, use this enthusiasm, excitement to do better, then you probably should actually use that energy and not meditate, because the meditation would reduce your arousal, it would reduce your energy, and then you might actually perform worse. Also, in some situations you need to be really competitive. So obviously professional sports players, but there are also some other jobs where you can be motivated by trying to compete with other people and trying to be intense. And if you take the edge off, that could, by meditating, it could also reduce how much energy and how much intensity you have. So in some situations, though, we are just too tired or too stressed out, too nervous. We're just too far on the spectrum to the point that it's not helpful. And in those situations, it can be helpful to bring us back to kind of a more functional level of stress or engagement. Because the Yerkes-Dodson curve, like if you have a medium amount of stress or a medium amount of engagement, then that's helpful for your performance. But if you have too little, then you don't care. If you have too much, then you're overstimulated and too stressed out. And so if you're so far that it's not helpful anymore, then reducing your stress through meditation could be helpful. So now I'd like to talk about my other research stream, which is also, I think, relevant on the effects of multicultural relationships, such as living abroad, the relationships people have, multicultural experiences in general. So one of the key, probably if you had to point to one key effect, one core reason why it's valuable to study abroad or live abroad or have relationships with people who are from another culture, that would be, I think, the increase in self-awareness that you get, because when you've only lived in your own culture, you kind of think that everything in your own culture is normal and that that's the way the world just works, because you don't have anything to compare it to. So when you live in another culture, you start to see how they do some things very differently. They value some things much less or much more in very different ways. They have different assumptions, they have different beliefs, they have different values, and by learning this new culture, you're able to look back on your own culture in a different way and in a more objective way, and so that you can choose whether some of the things that you thought were universal, some of the things that you thought were automatic, you can question them, you can see them as a thing instead of just the world, and you can choose what to believe in, and you can choose how to live your life. So there's value both in understanding your own values and understanding your own culture, and also being able to step away from it and to see it more objectively from a more third-party point of view. So, and the way that you're able to get some of these other benefits is because you're learning the culture, and when you learn a new culture, it colors the way you interpret the world, because you have new values or assumptions or beliefs, you have new information, you have a new schema to use, you have a new lens, if you want to think about it, like different cultures are kind of like different glasses you could have to look at the world. And if you look at the world as an American, it's going to be different than if you look at the world as a Japanese or as someone from another culture, because those assumptions and values and beliefs color the way that the world looks and the way that you interpret reality. So this can be valuable because it gives you more different ways of looking at things and more different information to draw on when you're trying to approach a problem or trying to understand how to navigate a different situation. So one of the key influences here is that when you have more cultural frames to draw on because you've lived abroad, then this has been found to help people become more creative, because each of these different cultural frames is a source of information, is a source of ideas, is a source of values and assumptions, and you can draw from both of those different cultures that you have in your mind once you've learned a new one, for each different one you learn. And this gives you more different things to pull from when you're trying to come up with a creative solution or come up with a new idea. And because you can pull things from either culture, or you can make new ideas that are a fusion of the different cultures. So you can, in some ways, take the best of both worlds. And so this has been found both in laboratory studies, it's been found in a study of high fashion house directors like Karl Lagerfeld, people who run huge high fashion companies. They've also found that the people whose directors have spent more time in different countries are more creative. Their fashion lines are judged as being more creative than people whose directors were not, had not lived in different countries, particularly for a longer period of time. So it's about the depth. It's not enough to just travel abroad or like go to a different country for a week. You need to actually live there for like 6 months or a couple of years in order to really understand the culture, because it takes a while to learn culture, and it takes effort. And if you don't actually try to engage with it and you don't really actually try to learn it, you can kind of be in an expat bubble. You can be kind of still reading the media from your own country, and it's kind of like you're not psychologically living in the country that you're living in. You have to actually be there and try to connect with it. So another kind of interesting finding here is that people who've traveled to more countries, they think that that more people are trustworthy, so they're more willing to make themselves vulnerable to other people, because maybe they have more of an identification with everyone in the world. They think they're a world citizen. They think that people are more innately good, so it's less likely that they're going to exploit you. But people who've only lived in one culture are more likely to kind of have their guard up and be less trusting. What we found in one study that we ran at INSEAD is that integrator complexity, which is a form of intelligence where you're able to think about different, seemingly contradictory, seemingly contrasting ideas and connect them in your mind, find a way that they could both be true, and find a way to integrate them. So usually we have what's called cognitive dissonance, where if there are two separate ideas, we resolve the tension between them by believing in one and saying the other one's not true. So if you have two friends who hate each other, you're usually going to choose one of the friends and get on their side. It's hard to have both of them be your friend for a long time and have them continue to hate each other. Or it's hard for us to think that two things, that, okay, someone is a good father, but he's also a bad musician. You usually want to think, okay, this person's good or they're bad. But in any case, the more people live abroad, the more they're able to keep these separate ideas in mind at the same time and think about ways that they could both be true. And what we found was that by increasing this form of intelligence, where they're able to keep these contradictory ideas in mind and integrate them, we found that it helped people get more job offers. And the reasoning here, we think, we'd like to do some follow-up studies to understand this a little bit better, is that we think that people can tell when others are open-minded and when they have this type of outlook on the world. Because in interview situations, this can help people solve problems better and remain calmer because there's less tension in the way that they look at things. And so this is obviously an outcome that a lot of people care about. It's not a super important marketing outcome, but it is one that matters in the world of work, especially when you're getting hired for any type of job. People want to be successful.